Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. It's so nice to have all of you. It is the 14th of January. We are so happy that all of you could be here today with us. We have quite a bit to discuss today. It's actually a really, really important subject. And why is it so important? It's so much a part of our faith to understand our history. And the history of the Baha'i faith includes the history of the Babi faith. This week's topic is a marathon of the spirit, the life and fate of Mirza Ali Sayyáh, the courier of the Bab. Being one of the earliest Babis and an example of faithfulness, we will follow the life of Mirza Ali Sayyáh, the traveler, as courier of the Bab, his later acceptance of the message of Baha'u'llah, his exile with him to Istanbul and Edirne, where he was recipient of tablets, and finally his exile to the Ottoman Cyprus, one of the four on an island, and his death in August of 1871. So, Dr. Alkan, welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today. It is not our
Thank
first,
you.
but our next session together. How is it over there?
Thank you. Thanks. It's fine. It's good here. It's evening in Germany now, as it is in
That's
Bahrain.
beautiful. That's beautiful. Yes, yes, I'm very blessed to be right now in Bahrain, such a beautiful country. The skies are always clear, almost never raining here, so it's definitely a whole nother experience. I do want to actually, Doctor, just quickly give an introduction for who you are for those of us joining today that don't know you yet. So, for everyone that doesn't know Dr. Alkan, he has done quite a bit in terms of study of Ottoman texts, quite a bit in terms of the study of history and just religious development as it relates to the Middle East. And it's really amazing to say that he has not just done research with the University of Bamberg in Germany, but he's also gone and been affiliated with the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in Israel. And he's also engaged in Baha'i studies, especially history, since his youth, studying Islamic studies and history, and then also studying Arabic, Persian, and Ottoman Turkish, besides, of course, his native Turkish. So, with all of these amazing pieces of background, including his PhD, where he wrote the thesis about the Babis and the Baha'is and the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, he's also gone through and made other presentations. And you're welcome to view them online. They're amazing. You should definitely check them out. And with that being said, we welcome you to visit the Clearwater Baha'is page. There you'll find quite a few of videos, including those of Dr. Alkan, and we're planning on having next sessions with him coming soon. So just wait. We're having it again with Dr. Alkan. And again, it's amazing the stuff that he's been able to pull out from the Ottoman text, from history. So we're really anticipating what we'll see today. Again, the Courier to the Bab is an amazing story, and we're looking forward to seeing that together today. We welcome all your questions. Please, as you do have questions, post them in the chat, and we will read them off to Dr. Alkan. Again, the chat comments on Facebook, on YouTube, it's going live. You're all welcome to please provide your questions. We'll get to them in order. Thank you again, Dr. Alkan. We really appreciate you being here with us today. Please unmute yourself. We all did that today too.
Yes.
Talking when we're
So
muted.
thank you, John. Yes, sorry about that. Thank you as always, John, and thank you for having me. And thank you to all those who organized this Clearwater online series, lecture series, and all who support this. I'm happy to be again here with you. Welcome, everyone. So today's topic, as John said, is about a very early believer, Mirza Ali Sayyáh, who was the courier of the Bab. Before I deal with the topic, let me just share with you so that you have an idea what sources I used. Foremost is Nabil's narrative, The Dawnbreakers, and then we have Shoghi Effendi's God Passes By, Abdul Baha's Traveler's Narrative, translated by the famed Orientalist E.G. Brown, and then we have Abdul Baha's Memorials of the Faithful, and surprisingly, Sayyáh is not included there. I was always surprised why. I don't know why. In any case, other sources I use also Ottoman archives in Istanbul, a few about Sayyáh. And then we have some secondary literature, some Persian Baha'i literature. We have Arif Tahirzade's Revelation of Baha'u'llah, Volume 2, about Istanbul and Edirne. Of course, Hassan Balyuz's Baha'u'llah. And then we have a very excellent article by Mujan Momin, The Cyprus Exiles, which deals with the 4 Baha'is exiled to Cyprus. And then, last but not least, we have a wonderful book by Bahia Nakhjavani, daughter of Ali Nakhjavani. And the book is called 4 on an Island. And I will also refer to this book, especially because in this book, Bahia Nakhjavani, she gathered all the information that was available to her about the 4 exiled to Cyprus, together with Mírzá Yahya. But rather than being just a historical, factual outline, this book is about, in her own words, about the lives of the 4 Baha'is as metaphor. And then, her interpretation of the 4 exiles is that they were not only 4 exiles, but symbolically the powers of the soul imprisoned within the self. It's a beautifully poetic treatment of the stories of these 4 Baha'is, inspired from her own experiences as pioneer in Cyprus many years ago. So the 4 Cyprus exiles are, I will also give some details, are Mishkin Kalam, the famed calligrapher, Baha'i calligrapher, who all of you know. And then we have Agha Abdul Ghaffar, who was a trader in the Ottoman Empire. We have Muhammad Baqir Qahveji, the coffee maker or tea maker of Baha'u'llah, whose photo is not here. And then, of course, Mírzá Ali Sayyáh, who's our main hero today. So these 4 were exiled to Cyprus together with Mírzá Yahya and Baha'u'llah and the other followers and believers and his family, together with 2 or 3 followers of Mírzá Yahya, were exiled to Akka. So the first one exiled, the first of the 4 who was exiled to Cyprus is Muhammad Baqir Qahveji. Qahveji means the coffee maker, but basically he was the tea maker in the household of Baha'u'llah. And in Mr. Tahirzade's Revelation, Volume 2, we have this short description of what it means to be a tea maker in those times. He says one of the essential features of life, and one which gave much pleasure, especially at gatherings, was the serving of tea. Not only was the quality important, but also the preparation needed great attention and skill. Tea was served in small glass cups. In order to enjoy its aroma, nothing would be added to it except lump sugar, which was broken off sugar cones. There were those who were expert tea makers. In Adrianople, it was Agha Muhammad Baqir Qahveji who made tea for Baha'u'llah and his companions. And we also know that this believer was, during the exile from Baghdad to Istanbul, he was accompanying Baha'u'llah and the others, and always he was the first one to wake up and to prepare the brazier, the samovar, and to cook tea for all of the exiles. The next one is Abdul Ghaffar of Esfahan, who was a trader. And in Abdul Baha's Memorials of the Faithful, we have a description about his life, where Abdul Baha says he was a highly perceptive individual who on commercial business had traveled about Asia Minor for many years. On the journey from Iraq to the great city, Constantinople, Abdul Ghaffar was a close and agreeable companion. He served as interpreter for the entire company, for he spoke excellent Turkish, a language in which none of the friends was proficient. The journey came peacefully to an end, and then in the great city he continued on as a companion and friend. The same was true in Adrianople, and also when, as one of the prisoners, he accompanied us to the city of Haifa. Here the oppressors determined to send him to Cyprus. He was terrified and shouted for help, for he longed to be with us in the most great prison. When they held him back by force from high up on the ship, he threw himself into the sea. This had no effect whatever on the brutal officers. After dragging him from the water, they held him prisoner on the ship, cruelly restraining him and carrying him away by force to Cyprus. And then Abdul Baha goes on, he was jailed in Famagusta, but one way or another managed to escape and hasten to Akka. Here, protecting himself from the malevolence of our oppressors, he changed his name to Abdullah. Sheltered within the loving kindness of Baha'u'llah, he passed his days at ease and happy. But when the world's great light had set, meaning when Baha'u'llah passed away, to shine on from the all-luminous horizon, Abdul Ghaffar was beside himself and a prey to anguish. He no longer had a home. He left for Damascus and spent some time there. Pent up in his sorrow, mourning by day and night, he grew weaker and weaker. And at the end, far from home, exiled from his love, he set out for the holy threshold of Baha'u'llah. He was truly a man long-suffering and mild, a man of good character, good acts, and goodly words. His sweet-scented tomb is in Damascus. Again, in Memorials of the Faithful, also Abdul Baha talks about Mishkin Kalam, saying that he was among the exiles and that he wielded a musk-black pen and his brows shone with faith. He was among the most noted of mystics and had a witty and subtle mind. The fame of the spiritual wayfarer reached out to every land. He was the leading calligrapher of Persia. He was famed throughout Asia Minor, Turkey. He was, besides for human virtues, a bright star. Meanwhile, he produces splendid calligraphs. He would write out the most great name, Ya Baha'u'llah, O thou glory of the all glorious, with marvelous skill, in many different forms, and would send them everywhere. He was then directed to go on a journey to Constantinople and set out with Janab Sayyáh. When he reached that great city, the leading Persians and Turks received him with every honor at first, and they were captivated by his jet-black calligraphic art. He, however, began boldly and eloquently to teach the faith. The Persian ambassador lurked in ambush. Betaking himself to the Sultan's viziers, he slandered Mishkin Kalam. As instructed by the ambassador, they carried reports to the prime minister, stating that the individual in question was stirring up mischief day and night, that he was a troublemaker, a rebel and a criminal. The result was they jailed him and sent him away to Gallipoli, where he joined our own company of victims. They dispatched him to Cyprus and ourselves to the Akka prison. On the island of Cyprus, Janab Mishkin was held prisoner in the citadel of Famagusta. And we learned that Mishkin Kalam stayed in the prison of Famagusta from 1876 till roughly 1879, when the British took over Cyprus, the island of Cyprus, from the Ottomans. And so Mishkin Kalam was free to go. But he stayed in Cyprus, went to Nicosia, the capital of Cyprus, and served the British there in some capacity until he left Cyprus for Akka in 1886. Now going back in time again to the time of Baha'u'llah's banishment in Edirne, we know that Baha'u'llah stayed in a few houses in Edirne, in Adrianople. So one of those was the house of Rizabe, which is still there and the place of pilgrimage for the Baha'is. He stayed there about 1 year and then transferred to the residence to the house of Amrullah, where he stayed about 3 months. In almost every tablet revealed during this whole period in Edirne, Baha'u'llah refers to the unfaithfulness and perfidy of Mírzá Yahya, his half-brother, and the harm he inflicted upon the cause of God. You know this episode where Yahya poisons Baha'u'llah and writes to Istanbul letters full of lies about Baha'u'llah and so on. So he became an opponent of Baha'u'llah, and in this period in Edirne, Baha'u'llah revealed many tablets. He says there streamed forth in one day thousands of verses in Edirne. And some of the tablets in this period he addressed to Janabi Sayyáh, to Mírzá Sayyáh, in honor of him, like the one called Lawh Sayyáh, Tablet to Sayyáh. I will mention this later on. So, and then going back in another few years in time to the time when Mírzá Sayyáh became an early believer. And this is from Bahaya Nakhjavana's book, where she says Mírzá Sayyáh began his marathon of the spirit in the earliest days of the Bab's dispensation and discovered its end in the citadel of Famagusta, where he died on 4th of August, 1871. Mírzá Sayyáh Maraghi, or Sayyáh, which means the traveler, acted as the servant and courier of the Bab in Makwa and Shahrik, ranked among his leading companions, and subsequently embraced the message of Baha'u'llah. So he's really like a very early link to the Bab and also to the relationship of the Bab with Baha'u'llah. His real name was Mullah Ali Adeguzel, and the year he was born we don't know, unfortunately, but we know he was born in Maraghe, and there are two cities actually named Maraghe. One is in Iran, in Azerbaijan, and the other one is in the region of Karabakh in the Caucasus, now in the Republic of Azerbaijan. I will come to that again later, why it's so important. In his interrogation in Istanbul by the Ottomans in 1868, I will mention it again, he says that he is from Karabakh and was born in Maraghe. So if this is the case, if he was not born in Iran, but in Karabakh, like in the Caucasus, then he could be really the first believer in the Republic of Azerbaijan. So basically, Sayyáh was Azeri Turkish, a Turkish-speaking believer, and his name, Adeguzel in Turkish, means the good named. And Sayyáh, the title Sayyáh, the traveler, was given him by the Bab. In the very early days of the faith, Sayyáh attained the presence of the Bab, recognized his station, and was numbered among his followers. And no sooner did he embrace the cause of the Bab than he began to serve his Lord with great dedication and earnestness. When the Bab was imprisoned in the castles of Makwa and Shahrik, Sayyáh served him as a faithful messenger. Sayyáh attained the Bab's presence many times in these fortresses and was one of his leading companions. From there, he proceeded to various parts of Persia, bearing the messages of the Bab to his followers and bringing their letters back to him. On one occasion, he carried some tablets in the handwriting of the Bab, together with an exquisite pen case as a gift from the Bab to Quddus. Now we come to the time after the battle at Sheikh Tabarsi, where, as you know, most of the letters of the living died defending themselves, and and with a ploy they were deceived, and the government, the soldiers attacked the Sheikh Tabarsi and almost killed everyone there. So what happened later is that the Bab, after hearing about this tragedy at Sheikh Tabarsi, from November 17 to December 17th in 1849, he resumed the work he had been compelled to interrupt, meaning revealing verses. The first page he wrote was dedicated to the memory of Mullah Hussein. In the visiting tablet revealed in his honor, he extolled in moving terms the unswerving fidelity with which he served Quddus throughout the siege of the fort of Tabarsi. He lavished his eulogies on his magnanimous conduct, recounted his exploits, and asserted his undoubted reunion in the world beyond with the leader whom he had so nobly served. He too, the Bab wrote, would soon join those twin immortals, each of whom had, by his life and death, shed imperishable luster on the faith of God. For one whole week, the Bab continued to write his praises of Quddus, of Mullah Hussein, and of his other companions, who had gained the crown of martyrdom at Tabarsi. So this is from the Dawnbreakers, and we have many descriptions about Sayyáh being in the service of the Bab. And then continuing, Nabil says in his narrative, no sooner had he, the Bab, completed his eulogies of those who had immortalized their names in the defense of the fort, then he summoned Mullah Adi Guzal, who was one of the believers of Maraghe, who for the last 2 months had been acting as his attendant. He affectionately received him, bestowed upon him the name Sayyáh, the traveler, entrusted to his care the visiting tablets he had revealed in memory of the martyrs of Tabarsi, and bade him perform on his behalf a pilgrimage to that spot. Arise, the Bab urged him, and with complete detachment proceed in the guise of a traveler to Mazendaran, and there visit on my behalf the spot which enshrines the bodies of those immortals, who with their blood have sealed their faith in my cause. As you approach the precincts of that hallowed ground, put off your shoes and bowing your head in reverence to their memory. Invoke their names and prayerfully make the circuit of their shrine. Bring back to me as a remembrance of your visit a handful of that holy earth which covers the remains of my beloved ones, Quddus and Mullah Hussein. Strive to be back ere the day of Nowruz, that you may celebrate with me that festival, the only one I probably shall ever see again. And Nabil continuing says, faithful to the instructions he had received, Sayyáh set out on his pilgrimage to Mazendaran. He reached his destination on January 15th, 1850. And by January 23rd, the first anniversary of the martyrdom of Mullah Hussein, he had performed his visit and acquitted himself of the mission with which he had been entrusted. From thence he proceeded to Tehran. So in Tehran, before he went to Tehran, actually, Shoghi Effendi says that the Bab prepared some of his disciples to expect the imminent revelation. Others he orally assured would live to see its day. To Mullah Baqir, one of the letters of the living, he actually prophesied in a tablet addressed to him that he would meet the promised one face to face. To Sayyáh, another disciple, he gave verbally a similar assurance. Now again, Nabil, allow me again to quote Nabil. He wrote, I have heard Aghay Kalim, which is Mírzá Musa, the faithful brother of Baha'u'llah, who received Sayyáh at the entrance of Baha'u'llah's home in Tehran, relate the following. It was the depth of winter when Sayyáh, returning from his pilgrimage, came to visit Baha'u'llah. Despite the cold and snow of a rigorous winter, he appeared attired in the garb of a dervish, poorly clad, barefooted, and disheveled. His heart was set afire with the flame that pilgrimage had kindled. No sooner had Sayyid Yahya Darabi, surnamed Wahid, who was then a guest in the home of Baha'u'llah, been informed of the return of Sayyáh from the fort of Tabarsi, then he, oblivious of the pomp and circumstance to which a man of his position had been accustomed, rushed forward and flung himself at the feet of the pilgrim. Holding his legs, which had been covered with mud to the knees, in his arms, he kissed them devoutly. Abdul Baha later, when he was in America, recounted a similar story about Sayyáh. He says, I remember once in Tehran when I was a child, so Abdul Baha must have been about 5 years old. I was sitting by Agha Sayyid Yahya Wahid when Mírzá Ali Sayyáh came in wearing the taj and carrying the rod of a dervish, with his bare feet covered with mud. Someone asked him where he was coming from. He replied that he had come from the fortress of Mahku, from the august presence of the Bab. Wahid arose immediately and threw himself at the feet of Sayyáh. And with tears streaming down his face, he rubbed his beard on Sayyáh's feet, saying, he has come from the court of the beloved. Although Wahid was a renowned and illustrious person, still he was humble before the servants of the threshold of God. And then we learned from Nabil that Sayyáh stayed a few days in Baha'u'llah's home in Tehran. but he was unable to perceive, as did Wahid, the nature of that power which lay latent in his host. Though himself the recipient of the utmost favor from Baha'u'llah, he failed to apprehend the significance of the blessings that were being showered upon him. So then Nabil says, I have heard him recount his experiences during his sojourn in Famagusta. So basically, later Nabil goes to Cyprus and meets Sayyáh and interviews him. And this is what Sayyáh tells him. Baha'u'llah overwhelmed me with his kindness. As to Wahid, notwithstanding the eminence of his position, he invariably gave me preference over himself whenever in the presence of his host. On the day of my arrival from Mazindaran, he went so far as to kiss my feet. I was amazed at the reception accorded me in that home. Though immersed in an ocean of bounty, I failed in those days to appreciate the position then occupied by Baha'u'llah. Nor was I able to suspect, however dimly, the nature of the mission he was destined to perform. And then I would like to refer to this book again, For on an Island by Bahia Nakhjavani, where she says that Sayyáh was given the bounty, not only of staying for some days in the home of Baha'u'llah in Tehran, but of carrying a message for him on his return to the Bab. Thus, without being aware of his own good fortune, he was briefly the means by which the twin manifestations of God communicated to each other on this brief occasion. The message, moreover, had an ironic significance in relation to his own fate, for it was dictated by Baha'u'llah to his half-brother Mírzá Yahya, and bore the signature of the latter. The Bab's reply to this very letter is what Nabil states was, quote, misconstrued as an evidence of the exaggerated claims which they, the people of the Bayan, have advanced in favor of their leader, meaning Yahya. Sayyáh therefore unwittingly becomes associated with the events which finally lead to the banishment of Yahya to Cyprus. It's a strange twist of fate that he should have been forced into that same exile. After the martyrdom of the Bab, we learn that Sayyáh stayed for a short while in Azerbaijan, and then he proceeded to Karbala in Ottoman Iraq, where he resided for about 12 years. And then, well, yes, in the course of his interrogation in Istanbul, he says that he stayed for 12 years in Karbala. And there also we learn that he married the daughter of an eminent disciple of the Bab, Sheikh Hassan Zunuzi. So he marries there and probably has children. And we learn that he was a firm and devoted believer at this time. And then we discover Sayyáh to have been among the radiant company gathered one night for a feast at the house of Baha'u'llah in Baghdad, sometime before his declaration, at which Abdul Baha, then a youth of 18, was the host. So after the meal tablets and prayers were chanted, the atmosphere was so charged with spirituality, so luminous with joy that it seemed a preparation for some mighty event. And it was then, according to Nabil, that the door opened without warning and Baha'u'llah entered with the greeting Allahu Akbar, meaning God is the greatest. Sayyáh, blessed among the rest, was anointed with rose water by Baha'u'llah and remained sleepless for the rest of the night, intoxicated with his presence. When Baha'u'llah arrived in Adrianople, Edirne, Sayyáh sought the presence of his Lord and devoted himself to his service. Here we see this photograph of Abdul Baha in Adrianople with his brothers and companions of Baha'u'llah, and the last four standing on the top right are Mishkin Kalam, Mírzá al-Sayyáh, and then in between we have the cook of Baha'u'llah, and then far right standing is Agha Abdul Ghaffar. So three of them were exiled to Cyprus, as I mentioned, and I will mention again. And when Baha'u'llah was in Edirne, I referred to this briefly, This stay in Edirne was actually a witness to the betrayal of the trust of the Bab by Mírzá Yahya, who called himself Sobhi Azal, the unfaithful brother of Baha'u'llah, and it shattered the unity and solidarity of the Babi community and brought in its wake untold sufferings to Baha'u'llah and his followers. So we need to know the story about the evil deeds of Yahya that caused much pain and anguish for Baha'u'llah and the community, also later in Akka. So almost immediately after the most great separation, meaning that Baha'u'llah had cut off Mírzá Yahya from the Babi community, and then actually also the greeting was changed from the Babi Allahu Akbar to Allahu Abha. So actually officially there was a Babi community and then the new Baha'i community. So in this time, Baha'u'llah revealed the weightiest tablets associated with his sojourn in Adrianople. And tablets of this period are, as I mentioned, for example, tablet to Sayyáh and the Surah of the Sorrows revealed in honor of Mírzá Ali Sayyáh. Now, in the tablet to Sayyáh, Baha'u'llah unveils the glory of his station, states that he is the ancient beauty, through whose command the whole of creation has come into being, affirms that mankind turns to him in adoration and clings to the hem of his bounty, even though it is unable to recognize him in this wondrous revelation. Baha'u'llah alludes also to the followers of the Bayan, to the Babis, who have denied and repudiated his cause, refers to them as the people of sedition and the company of Satan, reminds them that for many years he had associated with them, but had hidden his glory from their eyes so that none might recognize him. But they, the Babis, had risen up against him in great enmity, at least most of them. It was then that he unveiled the beauty of his countenance and shed the radiance of his face upon all creation. Baha'u'llah also declares that the days of tests have come. There are passages in this tablet which throw light on the severity of the tests which the believer encounters when he treads the path of faith. And this is also alluding to the Babis who would deny him later. And then we have this tablet of sorrows, which we have in a provisional translation, where Baha'u'llah, in the beginning of that tablet, addresses Sayyáh. He says, "O thou traveler, Sayyáh in the realm of divine unity, plunge into the ocean of grandeur that became manifest with my name, the most glorious, whereupon were launched the arks of eternal life, which were boarded by those servants who detached themselves from this world. O Ali, if thou gazest at my limbs, at all my limbs and members, at my heart and my breast, thou wilt find the marks of the bullets that struck the temple of God. Behold, the manifestation, meaning the Bab who preceded me, doth weep. And addresses thee, saying, O Ali, by God, the eternal truth, if thou wilt but look upon my heart and my breast, upon what is concealed within me and what is manifest, upon my internal state and my outward condition, thou wilt discover scars from the darts of rancor that struck my later manifestation." So here Baha'u'llah actually connects the sorrows, the trials of the Bab with his own sorrows and trials. And then, of course, when this mischief of Yahya was continuing in Edirne, we had also some rumors in Istanbul, filling the minds of the Ottoman authorities with fear about Baha'u'llah and the activities of the Baha'is. And Mírzá Ali Sayyáh, together with Mishkin Kalam and one another, they were sent to Istanbul to win the esteem and friendship of the Persian ambassador. Their zeal, perhaps, as we know from history, overstepped the boundaries of discretion, because if I may put brackets here, Baha'u'llah had forbidden to teach the cause in the Ottoman lands, actually. But Sayyáh and Mishkin Kalam, it seems, they were very bold and courageously sometimes unwisely in official circles, they taught the faith. And so they may have been among those referred to by the guardian of the faith as who aggravated an already acute situation. But whether due to their own outspokenness or the viciousness of their enemies, however, it was not long before they were detained and Mirza Ali Sayyáh found himself being interrogated. It seems significant that in the records remaining in these interrogations, the overriding impression one is left with is, paradoxically, the great wisdom, restraint, and circumspection of all those being questioned. If Sayyáh and Mishkin Kalam had been overzealous when they were free, they were certainly the epitome of discretion once they had been detained. And these images are actually the minutes of the interrogation in Istanbul. So these whole pages questioning 6 Baha'is and 1 follower of Mirza Yahya. As a result of this, the Ottoman Prime Minister, he succeeded in securing from Sultan Abdulaziz an imperial edict dated 26 July 1868, ordering Baha'u'llah's exile to the fortress of Akka and his life imprisonment within the walls of that prison city, as we know. And in the same edict, 5 others mentioned by name were to be exiled with him. They were the 2 faithful brothers of Baha'u'llah, Aghi Kelim and Mirza Muhammad Qoli, his faithful servant Darwish Sidq Ali, the Antichrist of the Baha'i revelation, who deceived Yahya, Sayyid Muhammad Isfahani, and his accomplice Aghajan Bey. Mirza Yahya was condemned to life imprisonment in Famagusta, Cyprus, as you all know, along with the 4 Baha'is I already mentioned. So Mishkin Kalam, Sayyáh, Kahveji, and Abdul Ghaffar. And this is a clipping from one of the Ottoman newspaper actually mentioning the exile of some Babis to Cyprus and Akka, dated 19th of August 1868. And then again coming to the book For on an Island, the author says little else has been recorded of the remaining 3 years of Sayyah's life, meaning the time his exile begins in Cyprus in 1868 until 1871, until he dies. There is nothing actually about him, almost nothing. And the last to have met him was Nabil, who heard him recount his experiences during his sojourn in Famagusta. And it seems fitting that that episode in exile among the Azalis should be referred to as a sojourn, a brief stay, before this runner rose again and sped onward to the worlds of light beyond. So actually, there are 4 files in the Ottoman archives in Istanbul about Sayyáh, and one file is from before his death. And this letter actually was written by himself in Turkish, dated 22nd of July 1871, asking the district governor of Famagusta to provide a daily allowance and a house for his poor family and 1 female servant who came from Baghdad, since he is imprisoned in the citadel and has no means to provide for them. As I said, there are 4 files about Sayyáh at the Ottoman archives, and the 3 other files date from just after his death, which is on 3rd of August 1871 and not 4th of August as we have in Baha'i sources. In any case, there are various official letters about what to do with Sayyah's family, and from Baha'i sources we learn that his family stayed in Cyprus after his death, and that Mishkin Kalam actually married Sayyah's widow Fatima and took care of her children as well. And then in Traveler's Narrative, which was translated by E.G. Brown, and he has copious appendices and footnotes in that book, he summarizes actually some documents from the state papers of the British Cyprus government, And in one document mentions that Sheikh Ali Sayyáh arrived as an exile at Famagusta after his death. And after his death, an allowance of 2.5 piastres a day was given to his widow and each of his children. And Mishkin Kalam subsequently married the widow. So we actually almost know, I would say, that after Sayyáh unfortunately died, and from one source which E.G. Brown mentions, he says that Sayyáh died from poisoning. But that's all we know. We don't know if he was poisoned or he was poisoned by some food or whatever. So we don't know, unfortunately. But Sayyáh was buried in Cyprus, and it's very important to say that he was this very early link, going back to the early days of the Bab, being his courier and being the link between the Bab and Baha'u'llah, and then later served Baha'u'llah faithfully. So it's really a treasure for Cyprus and the Baha'i community to have this treasure of the grave of Sayyáh in Cyprus. Now, when we pursue history, I think there should be lessons to learn from what we learn about history, and in this case from Sayyáh's life. And I would like also again to quote from Bahia Nakhjavani's For on an Island, how she links his life to our lives. She says Sayyáh was the messenger of the Bab. He soared on the dawn breeze, uplifted by the words he carried, and the moment of daybreak found him light untrammeled, leaping from lord to lord. He trod the high paths of the mountain passes, fleet past brigand shadows, carrying a breath of life to the body of the believers, himself alive with the breeze of holiness laden with the love of his Lord. His spirit is stirred with the tempestuous wind of God in this day. He is the symbol of detachment, for we might allow ourselves to imagine that the Bab is not only telling him to wear the guise of a traveler, but inviting him to become a wayfarer in the path of God, a seeker of certitude through the 7 valleys of the Spirit, the embodiment of restless endeavor, of active service. The character of Sayyáh invites us, therefore, not only to direct ourselves towards the dayspring of this revelation, as Muhammad Baqir, the tea maker, did, nor merely to plunge headlong into love of the ancient beauty, as Abdul Ghaffar did, but to arise, put our whole trust in him, and become active Baha'is. And then Mrs. Nakhjavani continues saying, the mastery of this man's life lay in the quiescence at its end. His son rose running and sat in a prison cell. The chains of interrogation could not stop his zeal. Though his tongue was bound and his legs restrained, still the heart of him was running. Such divine restlessness not only transforms the individual, but can influence a whole civilization. It is the light that radiates through those souls responsible for the progress of the world and the advancement of its peoples. It is what makes them like unto leaven, which leaveneth the world of being, and constitutes the animating force through which the arts and wonders of the world are made manifest. The impulse to express the spiritual restlessness in action can be conducive, therefore, to the establishment of a new world order. Thank you. So, if there are any questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this beautiful presentation. There's one big question we got to ask.
Yes.
Is there more to be discovered, do you think, about our personage, Mr. Sayyáh? Is there anything more we can learn about him, you think?
I hope so. As I mentioned in my earlier talks, the Ottoman archives is huge. It's the biggest archives in the world, having at least 150 million papers, documents, and so and they're cataloging always new ones, digitizing. So hopefully, and nowadays for the last 5 to 10 years, probably there's also the possibility to do it online for anywhere from your laptop. Just search for documents and hopefully also find new ones. And of course, others about Baha'i history. Thank you, John.
So another question for you. The subject matter, and again, you pulled for some sources, including the Ayman records. The subject matter, clearly, there could be more that we discover. What is it that you find most appealing of the current sources you found? Which source would one best be served finding a lot about this personage, Mr. Sayyáh?
I mean, yes, it's Nabil's narrative, I guess, and the God passes by. So it's mostly Baha'i sources. And unfortunately, there's not much about him. As I said, we don't know much about his early life, when he was born, how he became a Babi, how he met the Bab. But he was, I didn't mention that he was actually in Iran and Azerbaijan. He was a student of a prominent other Babi, if I'm not wrong. And so, and this way he became a believer. So, so for now we have Nabil's narrative and God passes by, and of course also some Persian sources, but they all repeat the same things.
Okay, beautiful. So one question is about the fate of his family. Now, we understand that Mishkin Kalam, he weds the wife. Now, the wife and the children, the family, they their destiny. Do we know much about that? What happened to them?
Actually, in the translation of a traveler's narrative by which Abdul Baha wrote and which this E.G. Brown translated at the beginning of the 20th century. As I said, there are copious notes and then explanations and other sources, appendices. And there, E.G. Brown also says with all probability, when Meshkin Kalam left Cyprus for Akka, the family of Sayyáh stayed in Cyprus. And I actually learned from Baha'i in Cyprus that she interviewed many years ago descendants of Sayyáh in Cyprus, who were, of course, Turkish by that time. So, but she received some information from them, and that also one of the great grandchildren went to London, and so it's a thing to be researched again, I think.
Thank you so much for making that a little more clear. That's quite a bit of information if someone wants to follow that.
Actually, now, also, may I add, sorry, John, may I also add, actually, as you know, Mírzá Yahya died in Cyprus in 1912, and he had many wives and children, as we know. They're all mentioned also by E.G. Brown, and then in this article by Mujan Momen, the Cyprus exiles, there is a detailed list of the wives, of the children, and so on. And so we know that some stayed in Cyprus, eventually, became Muslims, and to this day there is an Ezel family actually in Cyprus. They're aware of their heritage, but I guess they don't know much about Babi or Baha'i, but they know about Yahya and that he was exiled. And there were recent, like some 10 years, 20 years ago also, interviews with these people by journalists in Cyprus, and who interviewed the Ezel family. And also, Mujan Momin also mentions this in his article from about 40 years ago, I think, that there are descendants of Mirza Yahya also in Cyprus, but totally unaware and no connection whatsoever to the Baha'i community.
I'm taking a moment to let that sink in there. That's quite a bit of new information. So this information is readily available, as you mentioned, in some interviews that were made by
Yes.
various media outlets, correct?
Yes, yes, Cyprus newspapers. The Turkish part of Cyprus, the northern Cyprus.
Actually, just for the sake of recognition, a lot of people don't know about some of the issues that happened in Cyprus, being that there's a Turkish part of Cyprus. Could you, just as a matter of context, nothing more, but just the context, provide us an understanding of what that means?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, Cyprus is, yeah, as you know, it's an island in the East Mediterranean, and it was for about 400 years Ottoman until 1878, until the British took over with some agreement with the Ottomans, and then later, after they left, there was one Cyprus, not divided, and as you know, there are Greeks and also Turks living there, always together. But due to some issues, there were problems then among the Greeks and the Turks, and so there's a version by both sides that they attacked each other, and then in the 1950s and 60s and later in the 70s, there were clashes and even killings among the two communities, until then in 1974, Turkey, like the Turkish military, went there and occupied the northern part, and actually the Republic of Northern Cyprus, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, was proclaimed, but to this day it is contested and not officially recognized. And the border between northern and southern Cyprus is a UN. It's guarded by UN soldiers, and so it's still a tricky issue. And but the interesting thing is that there's one national spiritual assembly in Cyprus, as there was only one national spiritual assembly in Germany. Although we had until 1989 two Germanys, it was always one NSA. So we have one NSA of Cyprus, which makes me hopeful that it will be united someday.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. This is quite a bit of background information that a lot of people, especially those in the West, would be completely unaware of. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Yes, I think that as it relates to questions that we are actually out of questions. And okay, now we have our last question. That's good. We have a question here. All right, from Diana. Do you know why the 4 Baha'is were sent to Cyprus and the 4 Azalis were sent to Akka?
That's a very interesting question. I have nothing official. I haven't seen anything in the Ottoman documents, like the exile edicts. But my theory is that the Ottoman government wanted to create mischief, like among these two communities, like you know, divide and rule. You know, this policy of divide and rule. So you send some Azalis with the Baha'is to Akka, and then you send some Baha'is with the Azalis to Cyprus, and to keep this whole thing unbalanced. That's my guess. I really don't know. hopefully me or someone else will find the real answer.
Well, yeah, that seems similar to some sources that I've read as well pertaining to the exile. So that's appreciated that the question was asked, and also that Dr. Al-Khan, you were able to provide that. It looks like as it relates to questions, that was about it. So we thank everyone who have asked questions. Thank you, Dr. Al-Khan, for being here to
Thank you so much.
For all of you who are interested in these sessions and learning more, Dr. Al-Khan has another video, and we'll be making more videos online. So please come to clearwaterbahais.org. Check out our section for next week. The session next week will... I have a unmuted person. Hello?
Yeah, I posted a question earlier about if our lecturer knows about or could do a lecture on Sheikh Salman, who was the illiterate courier. I've never read much about him, but I'm curious about him too, and I'm wondering if our lecturer today knows about him or could do a future lecture about him.
Possibly, yes. I have to see what if maybe. I mean, I have to see what sources are available, and inshallah.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. Yeah, because
thank you
for these remote persons, especially to us Westerners, sort of tie together things for us. Anyway, thank you. Sorry for interrupting, John.
No. I mean, it's really important because this Salman also received many tablets by Baha'u'llah. So he's some important believer as well. Thank you.
Yeah, as he was illiterate, it's something that, as a matter of judiciousness, it was deemed to be best after the session, so we could talk about it to see if it would be a viable subject. So thank you, Norbert, for asking the question nonetheless. Dr. Al-Khan will be happy to have you present on it, as well as the next planned session. We are always, and we mean this, as you heard from Norbert as well, we're very interested in seeing what other research you can present before us, as we will all greatly learn through just exposure to sources we wouldn't normally see. So thank you again for all your hard work and research.
Thank you, John. If I may add, I mean, there are so many documents I haven't used in my first book, and so, as you know, John, I embarked again on this journey, you know, to read, to sift through the Ottoman documents, and there are many more about the history, be it in Edirne, Akka, to various topics. So hopefully, as time passes by, I will be able to present other topics.
And we are here ready to present them with you, have them on on Clearwater Baha'is. And with that being said, we wish all of you a beautiful Sunday, but please, before you leave, if you're on YouTube and Facebook, please make that subscription, like the post, so you can also share the post so other people can become aware of this history. We thank you again, Doctor, and we thank all of you who are supporting this content by sharing the content and learning from it, and you know, serving as inspiration to maybe follow in Dr. Al-Khan's footsteps to also be one of the future historians of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.